Do you know that India generates about 62 million metric tons of solid waste annually, of which only 43 million metric tons is collected and only 11.9 million metric tons is treated? This means that approximately 18.1 million metric tons of solid waste is not collected and ends up in landfills, open dumps, and water bodies. We generally consider landfills and open dumps as waste, and none of us think of the trash that ends up in water bodies. And yes, myself Prabhas, today I am here to talk to you about floating trash, a major problem in India, particularly in its water bodies like rivers, lakes, and oceans. Floating trash may be seen as being farther away from people's daily lives compared to landfills, which are often located closer to residential areas. As a result, people may not feel as directly impacted by floating trash. This may be the reason why people ignore floating trash compared to landfills. India's population of over 1.4 billion people generates an enormous amount of waste, much of which ends up in these water bodies. It is difficult to estimate exactly how much of the waste ends up in water bodies, but studies have shown that a significant amount of the waste generated in India ends up in its water bodies. Before further discussion on the problem addressed, let me introduce my teammates. Myself, Prabhas, Srishant Reddy, and Tarakram. Let us look into the reasons for the floating trash problem. There are several reasons for floating trash problem in India, some of which are lack of proper waste management. One of the main reasons for floating trash problem in India is the lack of proper waste management systems. Many cities and towns in India do not have a comprehensive waste management infrastructure, resulting in garbage being dumped in water bodies or left on the streets, eventually finding its way into the water bodies. And the next reason for floating trash problem is the rapid urbanization. The rapid pace of urbanization in India has led to an increase in the generation of waste. The waste generated in cities and towns is often dumped in water bodies or left on the streets, resulting in floating trash. And the next reason is poor awareness and education. Many people in India are not aware of the harmful effects of dumping waste in water bodies. There is also a lack of education on the proper disposal of waste, which contributes to the floating trash problem. Inadequate sewage treatment is another factor contributing to the floating trash problem in India. Untreated sewage and wastewater are often released into water bodies, carrying along with them garbage and other pollutants. You may be surprised to know that even natural disasters are one of the reasons for floating trash problem in India. Natural disasters such as floods, specifically to India, can also contribute to the floating trash problem in India. When floods occur, they wash away garbage from landfills and dump sites, causing it to end up in water bodies.
In the context of the floating trash problem, customers can refer to different groups of people or entities depending on the specific aspect of the problem being addressed, some of which are citizens. This problem has significant effects on citizens' health, environment, economy, and social well-being. Floating trash in water bodies can lead to the spread of waterborne diseases such as cholera and typhoid. This poses a significant health risk to citizens who use contaminated water for drinking or other purposes. And our next customer is aquatic life. It has a significant impact on aquatic life. It disrupts the food chain, destroys natural habitats, and exposes aquatic animals to chemical contaminants, ultimately threatening the survival of many species. Our next is industries. The floating trash problem is a complex issue that involves a variety of industries and factors such as plastic industry, shipping and fishery industry, and municipal waste management. Many industries discharge their waste into nearby water bodies without proper treatment. This waste can include plastic, chemicals, and other materials that can contribute to the floating trash problem. Our next is government. The government at the national, state, and local levels has a responsibility to address the problem of floating trash in India. Now let us discuss on the different perspectives of the problem being addressed. Our first is environmental perspective. From an environmental perspective, floating trash is a significant problem as it can harm marine life, pollute water bodies, and affect the overall ecosystem. Plastic waste, in particular, can take hundreds of years to decompose and can cause long term damage to the environment. Additionally, the decomposition of plastic waste in water bodies releases harmful chemicals that can pollute the water and harm the marine life. Next is economic perspective. From an economic perspective, the presence of floating trash can affect tourism and other industries that depend on clean water bodies. It can also increase the cost of water treatment and cleanup efforts. For example, the Indian government has spent close to 11,500 crores for implementing 158 out of total 346 planned projects for cleaning and rejuvenating the river Ganga under the Namami Ganga project funded by National Mission for Clean Ganga. From here on, my teammate Tarak would be discussing on the other perspectives of the problem.
Social perspective. From a social perspective, the issue of floating trash can affect the quality of life for people who live near water bodies as it can create an unsanitary and unpleasant living environment. This problem is a result of lack of awareness and responsibility towards waste disposal among the general public. In many areas, there is a lack of proper waste management infrastructure, and people often resort to dumping waste in water bodies. And the next is cultural perspective. In India, the problem of floating trash in rivers and water bodies is often viewed through a cultural lens that emphasizes the spiritual and religious significance of these bodies of water. Many people believe that rivers are sacred and that the act of offering flowers, food, and idols to the deities in the water is a way to honor and appease them. Consequently, efforts to clean up this waste are sometimes met with resistance as some people view it as an attack on their religious beliefs. And, and thirdly, historic perspective. Historically, waste disposal in India has been a challenging issue with a lack of proper waste management infrastructure leading to the dumping of waste in open areas, including water bodies. However, the problem of water trash has worsened in recent years due to the increased use of plastic and other non biodegradable materials in daily life. Unfortunately, the growth in plastic usage has not been matched by adequate waste management infrastructure. Ethical perspective. From an ethical perspective, one of the key ethical concerns is the impact of this trash on the environment, as it can harm wildlife, pollute water sources, and contribute to climate change. Furthermore, the issues raises questions about responsibility and accountability, as individuals, corporations, and governments all play a role in addressing the problem. And last one is contextual perspective. The issue of floating trash in India is a complex and multifaceted problem that requires a contextual perspective to understand its root causes. India is one of the most populous countries in the world with a rapidly growing population and urbanization rates. This combined with inadequate waste management infrastructure, cultural attitudes towards littering, and limited environmental awareness has led to the proliferation of floating trash in water bodies across the country. To conclude, plastic debris is the most common and exponentially increasing human pollutant in the water bodies. It is our responsibility to reduce the usage of plastic and other non biodegradable materials so that we can preserve glory of the nature. Efforts are being made by the government and non-governmental organizations in India to address the floating trash problem. These efforts include the implementation of waste management systems, awareness campaigns, and cleanup drives. However, much work still needs to be done to effectively tackle this issue and prevent further damage to the environment. and human health.